Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. It is finally time for week 1 picks for the 2023 season of the Overwatch League. Games kick off this Thursday, tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, 8 p.m. in Europe, I think, or the parts of Europe. I don't know. You can figure out your time zones. Pick'ems are back, so we can do that. Pick'ems are cool this year. I recommend you check them out. If you haven't done them yet, you can kind of see the community picks and stuff for games. A lot of games to cover, though. 4 days of games, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So let's jump in and let's just get into it and start talking about the matches that we have going into this weekend, starting with the San Francisco Shock taking on the Toronto Defiant. History, of course, with these teams, and you have players like Sam and Kaluge, who were on the Shock last year. So, some old buddies matching up. Two teams that had interesting kind of paths in the Pro-Am that we saw a couple weeks ago. Defiant, of course, making it into the top 4 with a win over the Boston Uprising. Shock, close series loss to the Houston Outlaws in the top 8. But this is a team in the Shock that we haven't seen play yet in North America. They were playing from Korea for that last Pro-Am tournament, and so we haven't really seen them at their full strength yet. And they are a roster that a lot of people have very, very high in their power rankings, and a lot of people predict them to do very, very well, myself included. So this is an interesting game. I do like the Defiant a lot. I think they are a very good team. I like what they've done. They're essentially Team USA with a couple of other pieces in there. But generally speaking, I think the Shock should be very, very good. The meta is a little up in the air right now. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. It seems like Tracer Sombra is somewhat popular of a prediction, as well as a decent amount of popularity with things like Winston as the tank. There's also some Zarya and stuff too in the eastern region. It's a little tough to tell exactly, but I am going to predict the Shock to take this one. I think they're the better team right now. I'm going to give it to them in a 3-1 score. I think Toronto can take a map. I think they certainly could win the series, even if it's not like absurd to think that they couldn't or that they could, but I just don't think they're the best team in this game. I think that the Shockers look too good, and so to me, Shock take this one 3-1. Next game we have is the Washington Justice taking on the London Spitfire. Two teams on kind of interesting trajectories. The Justice, despite not making it into the top 8 for the Pro-Am, looked pretty good when we saw them. Spitfire made the top 8 and looked awful when they played against the Florida Mayhem. Now, Florida Mayhem ended up winning, so how much you take away from that, how much you take away from the Pro-Am in general, up to you. These are two teams in interesting spots, though. The meta is going to be very, very interesting to see kind of what it is. You know, where do you give the edge in terms of these teams and what they have on their roster? I think that if you kind of want to go like role for role, I think the places where the Justice are better, they're quite a bit better. I think Flora and Alfie is a better duo than what the Spitfire have, even with their trio of Backbone, Sparker, and Lethal. I just feel better about what we've seen out of Flora and Alfie. I think that Ben Best right now looks to be better than Hottie. I thought Ben Best had a really, really good showing in the Pro-Am. And you have Mirror there for added flexibility if you really need it. And then when you go to the support line, I think it's probably the closest part. FD got in Teru, not my favorite support line in the league. I think that Landon, Admiral, and Skyripa is a very good trio there. So I think it's very, very close. I think it's an interesting matchup. Very, very close from my understanding in the fan vote. 58.8% of fans going with the Spitfire to 41.2% going the way of the Justice. But I am in the minority here because I think the Justice are going to take this series by a score of 3-1. I think they look better right now. I like their roster a little bit more. I like what we've seen from them more, so going with the Justice to take this one. Up next, we have the Vancouver Titans taking on the Florida Mayhem. Mayhem, of course, coming off a very, very good run in their matchup in the Pro-Am. The Mayhem beat the Titans in the Pro-Am and then also won the whole Pro-Am itself. So this is a matchup we've already seen this year. It's one of the few we've actually gotten to see in this kind of first weekend of play. There's another one later on, but this one we have seen before. Mayhem won. They won it in a pretty one-sided fashion. I think the Mayhem look very, very good. Obviously, I ranked them number one in my power rankings going into the regular season because they are a team that really did alleviate all of my issues and concerns with this team. All the things I was worried about, they really kind of erased those things for me. So I think the Mayhem take this one. I think they take it pretty one-sided. I have a 3-0 win for the Mayhem over the Titans. I think they're better right now, and so to me, kind of a no-brainer to go the way of the Mayhem in this one. Moving on now to the New York Excelsior going up against the Atlanta Reign. Reign, very, very, very good team. We saw them play very well in the Pro-Am, though they did have a little bit of a disappointing end to their run. They looked very, very good. New York, bit of a surprise. They looked decent in the Pro-Am, but they certainly have a lot of room to grow. I think the New York is going to be a bit of a surprise this year for some people. I don't think they're going to be the worst team in the region. I think they're overall better than they were last year, just based on what we've kind of seen from them. But I don't think they have enough to overcome the Atlanta Reign, who I think right now are looking to be a top 2, top 3 team in the Western region and arguably the entire league. So I think this will be a pretty one-sided affair in favor of the Atlanta Reign. I think they take this one 3-0. They just look better right now, and I think that there's not really much of a reason to think otherwise. So yeah, Reign, to me, take this one very, very easily. One-sided affair there. Up next is a nice game that we have rematch from what we saw in the Pro-Am as well. Houston Outlaws versus the LA Gladiators. This was a game that went the distance in the Pro-Am and went the way of the LA Gladiators, who were pretty impressive in the Pro-Am. Obviously, they got second place. They did pretty well. Overall, I think this is going to be a really good game. I think these are two really good teams. They're very similarly matched, I think. They have a lot of talent on all areas, right? Outlaws, you have really good players in Pelican and Shu and Violet and Fearless kind of playing at their peak. Happy, very, very good. And then you look at the Gladiators, you have people like Kevster and Kai. You have someone like Dante, who's been a very impressive player. You have Babel and Funny Astro and Lastro kind of rounding that out. And you still have Yaki in the wings there as well. So this is a very interesting matchup that went the way of the Gladiators. I think in some ways Gladiators kind of knew how to force certain maps and whatnot. In a tournament style, it's a little bit different. I think it's a little bit easier to get those upset wins when you have the ability to pick maps that kind of work in your favor. But this is not the case in this series. I think the Outlaws, generally speaking, are the better of the two teams. I think they have more talent. I think they've looked a little bit better. And if the meta is what we kind of think it's going to be, I feel pretty good about what this team can do if Winston is the meta. Though I do think Tracer Sombra is probably a composition that I feel better about with the Gladiators than the Outlaws. I think the Outlaws just have such good high-end play that I do feel like they should take this one. But I think it's going to be a very, very close series. I am going to say a 3-2 win for the Outlaws in this matchup. Definitely one of the games I'm most excited for this weekend. Not a big pick, but one that I do think will be incredibly entertaining and one of the best games of the weekend. Moving on now, we have the Vancouver Titans taking on the Los Angeles Valiant. Matchup we haven't seen in a while. Of course, Valiant were in the APAC region for the past couple of years. Titans have been kind of down as a franchise for a while. But this is really the first time in a while that there's some positive vibes around both of these franchises. Everyone thought the Valiant would be a very negative vibe franchise, but they've actually done pretty well when we saw them in the Pro-Am, looking better than most people had expected them to. So it's interesting. I like the Titans a lot as well. I love their DPS duo of Aspire and Sugarfree. Sugarfree, of course, representing Team USA in the World Cup. So it's a very interesting roster just to look at. I mean, you have other guys on that roster too, representing their countries in the World Cup. Punk with Australia, Crimzo with Canada. So it's a very interesting roster just kind of across the board. When you look at who is on the team in general, it's very, very interesting. The Valiant, I still don't know what to expect out of them because we haven't really seen them with a ton of practice and play time with each other. You know, they didn't have a lot of time with each other when they played in the Pro-Am. So This is a very interesting game to really look at and see kind of how it goes. I think the edge in most people's mind is going to be the Vancouver Titans. I mean, 80% of fans think it's going to go the way of the Titans, so I think it's pretty clear that the Titans are the favorite here. We've seen them play at a bit of a higher level than we've seen out of the Valiant, though I do think the Titans aren't a shoo-in guaranteed win. If the Valiant won this game, I wouldn't be surprised. I think a lot of how the Valiant are going to do is going to be on the back of Seeker and Crawie, but I do favor the Titans in this one to take it by a score of 3-1. I think it'll be a pretty good game, but ultimately I do think right now the better team is the Vancouver Titans, and that's the team that I am picking to take this one. Next, we have the first of two big pick games for the week. As we move into the APAC region, only 3 games this weekend, all of them on Saturday. We have the Seoul Infernal taking on the Seoul Dynasty. This is a very interesting matchup. The APAC region is very, very hard to kind of get a read on right now. There are certain things that you can look at and kind of try to piece together the meta. We have been seeing the spring series contenders matches. I've watched the first 2 days of them. Lots of D.Va, lots of Winston, and quite a bit of Zarya as well. So it's interesting to kind of see where the region is at right now. It makes me think that the Dallas Fuel have had a pretty big impact on kind of what people are playing. But this is the first game between the Seoul Infernal and the Seoul Dynasty since the Infernal rebrand has gone through. So it's the first time we're getting the matchup between the two Seoul teams. And these teams are very, very close together, in my opinion. In my power rankings, I had them 1 spot apart from each other. I had the Dynasty ever so slightly, I think I had them just above the Infernal, but it was very, very close. I rate a lot of the players in this matchup very highly. Big P, Legendary, Prophet, of course, on the Seoul Dynasty, and Void, very, very good players. The rumor is that the Dynasty also added Belosria, who's a very good tank player. On the Infernal side, you have M3 and Zest, which is an incredible DPS duo. You pair them with Mag, who's been pretty good, though he's been a little bit inconsistent and not the kind of elite level player most people thought he would be. And then you have a pretty solid support line as well with Fixa and Skewed. The Dynasty definitely have a little more questions, but I think they have higher peaks. And I think with the addition of Belosria, they're a little bit more meta resistant. Obviously, I'm recording this before Belosria has been announced, so maybe they don't add Belosria, but that is what the rumor is. This is a very close series to me. I think it should go the distance. I think it'll be a really good, fun matchup to watch. But based on what we're hearing in terms of what the meta could be, if Zarya is really, really good, I just have to feel better about Void than I do Mag. If Winston's really good, I think that is the big potential break for the Infernal, because that is really where I would like to see Mag. That's the thing that I think he would be best on. So it's interesting to see, but right now I feel a little bit better about the Dynasty. Feels weird because this is really a close matchup, and they play very, very well when they play against each other. This one's very close in the fan prediction as well. But I am going to give this one to the Dynasty by a score of 3-2. Like I said, I think it's going to be incredibly close. These are two really good teams in this region, but I just feel a little bit better with the Dynasty right now, so I'm going to give them the edge in this one. Moving on, we have the Dallas Fuel taking on the Guangzhou Charge. Fan prediction of this one is very one-sided in the favor of the Dallas Fuel. I don't necessarily buy into that narrative. I think the Guangzhou Charge are a better team than people give them credit for. They were very, very good last year. I've been tooting their horn for a bit that this 5-man core that they have, and who knows if they're going to add someone else before the season starts. I mean, they technically have to, but sometimes they just go with player coaches and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens. But I do very much like this matchup. I think it's interesting, like I said, if Zarya is as good as what we think she might be based on what we've kind of seen in the APAC contenders scene, then Hanbin on Zarya was really, really good last year. It was really the thing that elevated the Fuel to a lot of their success throughout the season. It was good for them in the first tournament of the year, in the Kickoff Clash. It was good for them in the Countdown Cup. They were very, very good with the Zarya play. So I do think the Fuel are in a very good spot. If it comes down to a Zarya matchup, yeah, I feel better about Hanbin than I do Piggy. So I think it is reasonable to favor the Fuel. I don't think it's going to be a super one-sided affair like people think it is, but I am going to go the way of the Fuel 3-1, because I just think that right now they look better. I don't think it's necessarily a huge gap, but I certainly think the Fuel should be favored to walk away with this one. Next, we have the Hangzhou Spark taking on the Shanghai Dragons, the last APAC match of the week. Only 3 of them this week. Dragons just recently announced Iris. It's a weird addition to a team that, has a bunch of flex supports already. I wonder if they are moving DM back to the hit scan role and play a damage dealer role instead of flex support. I don't really know. It's weird. It's odd. This roster is really, really bizarre. I don't know what to make of it. Spark look really, really good on paper. Leave and Shy, absolutely incredible. Gushue and 20, very, very good. Monk and Langsa, very, very good. This is my favorite team in the APAC region. I think they look the best right now. Shanghai, arguably my least favorite team in this region. So to me, kind of clear 3-0 victory for the Spark over the Dragons. Who knows what moon is cooking? But for me right now, that's the vibe that I feel best about with this one. Moving back over to the Western region, let's talk about the Washington Justice taking on the Vegas Eternal. A lot of games on Saturday. We have 7 total, 3 in APAC, 4 in the Western region. And we kick off with Vegas Eternal versus Washington Justice. I think this is an interesting one. Vegas did not look good in the Pro-Am. Washington looked pretty good, but there's kind of, I think, room for growth for both of these teams. And who knows, maybe Vegas' performance in the Pro-Am was disappointing to the level where they really kind of go in and grinded over the past couple weeks or month or so. And maybe we find out that this team comes out and is significantly improved. Who knows what is going on with the Justice? I think they made some questionable decisions late in their series against the Gladiators in the Pro-Am. So who knows where they are? But right now, I just think the Justice just have way, way, way higher potential. I do not like what Vegas has done in the damage line in general. Give me Flora and Alpha Yi over what the Vegas Eternal have with Malful and Dove every day of the week. I think the Justice just look better. I think they have way more firepower, way more potential. I don't think this is a particularly close series. I am going to give this one to the Justice by a score of 3-0. I just do not feel good about the Eternal in this series. Moving on to the LA Valiant taking on the Houston Outlaws. Another one that I think will probably be a somewhat one-sided affair. I think the Outlaws look really, really good. I don't have a ton of faith in the Valiant against some of the top teams in the league and in their region. I think they're okay. I don't think they're incredible. So to me, this one, another pretty one-sided affair, 3-0 in favor of the Houston Outlaws. They look better. Their peaks are higher. Their talent is overall just better. And I just feel like this one, another one that's pretty easy to call in favor of the Outlaws. Up next is the NYXL taking on the Boston Uprising. This will be the first game for the Uprising in the season. Tons of rumors about this team. They're having all these issues and stuff, like things just not going well. They're kind of blowing up and having drama, whatever. I don't really think it matters. I think they're better than the New York Excelsior, really on every level. They're just a better team. The talent, I think, is better than what you have with New York. I think New York is a bit underrated, but they need to show what they are before I'm ready to kind of say they can take some games off of teams like Boston. So to me, this is a pretty one-sided affair as well. I'm going to go in favor of the Boston Uprising by a score of 3-0. I'm hoping the Boston rumors aren't completely true, but I suppose we'll see when the season actually begins what the case is there. Moving on to the second big pick game of the week. San Francisco Shock taking on the Atlanta Reign. My top 2 teams, or 2 of my top 3 teams, I should say, from my power ranking. I really, really like this matchup. And if the meta is what we think it is, and it is Tracer and Sombra, this is going to be an incredible matchup. Because you have Lip and Stalker, one of the best possible duos for Tracer Sombra in the league. versus Proper and Heesang, another really good duo for Tracer Sombra. Proper, arguably the best Tracer in the world, Lip, arguably the best Sombra in the world, going head-to-head. It'll be a really interesting matchup. And I think a lot of this game comes down to the kind of other parts of this roster, the tanks and the supports. I rate the Rain supports a little bit higher than the Shock supports. I think there's just more flexibility there, more ability to kind of perform at a high level. Arguably, the two best supports from 2022 together on the Rain. The Shock do have good players with Finn and Vindame. Like, those are two other very, very good support players. Rain, I think, have a little bit more flexibility there. Tank is where I think this matchup will be really interesting because I don't know what to expect out of the Rain. Donghak has looked okay. We haven't seen him at his full potential. I don't think he was in the U.S. for their first set of games in the Pro-Am. I think he was for their second game, or the bracket round game where they lost to the Gladiators. So it'll be interesting to see what this team has done. We haven't seen the Shock in the U.S. yet, so it's tough to call. But right now, I feel like what we see from both of these teams historically is that the Rain, generally speaking, start off the season stronger than they end. 2021 was the exception, whereas the Shock usually end the year better than they begin. That's been a trend. I think that this Shock roster is not perfect. I think there's some areas they need to improve upon. I feel better about what the Rain have in terms of just consistency in that damage duo. I think they have way more flexibility there. I think the Shock need to add another damage player before I think that they're really, really good and really, really elite, and able to kind of compete with everyone all the time. But I still think they're a really good team that has such talented players that they're always going to be in games. But I'm going to give this one to the Rain by a score of 3-2. These are both incredible teams. They're both really, really good. I would not be surprised if either of these teams won. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if either team managed to 3-0 the other one, right? Like, these are two teams where the level of variance could be so high. It could be a dominant game, and I wouldn't even necessarily be like annoyed or disappointed or think one team looks bad. These are just two very, very good teams with a ton of talent on them that we don't really know what to fully expect from them yet. So I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a 3-2, but I am going to go the way of the Rain because right now I just feel a little bit better about where they are in terms of kind of building up consistency and whatnot because they've been together a little bit longer than the Shock have. Up next, we move on to the final day of games on Sunday. We have the Vegas Eternal taking on the Florida Mayhem. This one shouldn't be close at all. The fans, 95% of fans think that the Mayhem are going to win. Actually, since I last checked, the favorite for the Mayhem, the number has gone up. It is 95.2% to 4.8% for the Eternal. And yeah, I think that feels pretty accurate. I think the Mayhem are just significantly better. I need to see anything from the Eternal before I give them any real chance at winning major games in the Overwatch League this season. So 3-0, my opinion, for the Mayhem. I think they're just that much better, and I think this game is not going to be particularly close. So give me the Mayhem sweep over the Eternal. Next, we have the London Spitfire against the Boston Uprising. London really hurt me with the way that they ended their Pro-Am run. Like I said, it was not good. Boston, who knows what they could be. I mean, they should be good when you look at the team and who they have on their roster and the just the names of the players and just the overall just talent that this roster has. They should be very, very good. They looked good in the Pro-Am, even though they did lose to the Defiant. They looked very, very good. I think they should only get better as the season progresses, realistically. So I feel like they are in a better spot right now than the London Spitfire are. London did not start the year well last year. That could very much still be an issue as they kind of work Lethal and Scarab into this roster. I don't think the Spitfire got better really this year. They kind of moved horizontally, which in a season where pretty much everybody got better, yeah, give me the Uprising in this one. I'm going to say a 3-0. I just think the Spitfire don't look very good, and so I favor the Uprising in this one. Final match of the weekend, we have the LA Gladiators taking on the Toronto Defiant. This will be a good one. Toronto plays the first match of the weekend, and they play the last match of the weekend, so I think it'll be pretty good for them. Gladiators have a pretty tough run here. I guess the Defiant do too. They have to play the Shock and the Gladiators. Gladiators have to play the Outlaws and the Defiant. So some tough matchups for these teams this weekend. Very exciting game. I honestly was very impressed in the Pro-Am by the Gladiators and what they were able to do, and their comfort in very interesting ways and kind of knowing what their strengths are and playing to those strengths. Not a lot of teams do that in the league and get praised for it, which is funny. I think sometimes we see teams like the Spitfire, they'll play a lot of Rhine and people criticize them for it, but if that's what you're good at and you can win with it, then you should do it, right? The Gladiators played a lot of Ramatra, something we haven't really seen a lot of teams play. We did see it a bit, but it was definitely a lot of like contenders teams that wanted to play it more than anything else. So it's an interesting matchup. The Defiant, I think, have the name and the synergy that the Gladiators don't have. But the Gladiators did so well in the Pro-Am and looked so good that really, I think I just feel better about them right now than I do the Defiant. It's close. I think this is going to be a 5-mapper. But ultimately, I think the Gladiators just looked better in the Pro-Am, and I'm going to give them the win in this one by a score of 3-2. Very close, very good series in my opinion, but that's who I am giving it to. So there you go. Those are all of my picks. I'll throw them up for you right now. Lots of games this weekend. I'm hoping we get a little fewer games going forward every weekend, but I think just because it's the first weekend, they want everyone to play the first weekend. So we'll see what happens as we go. But those are my thoughts for it this season, this first week. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, where you agree, where you disagree, anything like that. And then Monday, check back in where we're going to take a look back at the week and talk about all of the players or all of the results a bit and kind of run through them like I do every year. But that's it for me today. Thank you once again. If you enjoyed this video and want to like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. And I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.